All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Thank whoever brought you air. To my regular listeners, we are again in for a treat because I have another absolutely incredible guest that's going to teach us all about the importance of passive income, the importance of making sure you're investing, and the importance of making sure you're doing it from a good place. All right, a lot of you guys in business got to understand you have to be doing business and going after projects, and has to be coming from a good place. So with all that, Mr. Axel Meierhoefer, correct?
Very good,
There
Asman.
you
Very
go.
good.
Hey, listen, when you have a difficult name like I have, you make it clear that it's important you get people's names right. I take that very seriously. And as long as I've been posting podcasts, I have to make sure I do that right. So welcome to the show, man. Great to have you. Thank
Yeah,
you
hey,
for coming on.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's get this started, man, because I was listening to you before, and you talk a lot about the aspect of investing in real estate, whether it's residential and making sure it's passive income and things like that. I think it's the best place to start is just give us a little bit about your background, where you're from. I believe you have is it a military background you have? And you
Yeah,
got
exactly.
things.
So yeah, I was in the Air Force and in aviation, when you actually fly planes, especially fighter planes, it's quite taxing on your body. So
Hmm?
when you're reaching about 40, early 40s, your body is really not quite up to the stress anymore, the physical stress. So the Air Force gives, at least in my case, they gave me the option to either retire or basically get onto a desk job. And I didn't want to have a desk job in the Air Force. So I took the retirement option and was recruited as an executive in a software company in Santa Barbara. Did that for 4 years, and then there were a bunch of circumstances that led me to start my own consulting company. And with that, I also realized, I mean, I had kind of realized it before, but it became really imminent that with my Air Force pension, if that would be the only other income I would ever have in my life, I would probably have to work forever. Right. And so I thought, well, okay, that's not really a good approach. What can I do to get to at some point in the future where I could make the decision to say, okay, there's enough money coming in between that pension and whatever else I can generate. And honestly, for your audience and for anybody in business, I would say my thinking was at the time already, this is like 18 years ago, that I didn't really want to count on Social Security.
Hmm.
Right. So that was the starting point, and I started looking around. And if you think about it, was basically around 2005, 2004, 5. That
Right.
was relatively recently after the dot-com bubble had burst, and so many people had lost a lot of money in stocks. So that wasn't really an option, and I obviously didn't want to or have any kind of 401k stuff in my little one-person company. So I looked around. I looked at what kind of like people with famous names were doing, and I found most of them do real estate.
Right.
So I basically started looking into this, and the approach that we ultimately ended up developing, or I developed, and we still do today successfully, came from the fact that this software company I was working at was actually in the Santa Barbara area, and anybody who's ever been there, it's a really expensive area
Hmm.
where investing, at least the traditional investing that a regular person can do, is just doesn't pencil out. So I
Right.
needed to find another solution, and I found a solution using turnkey providers in locations around the country where your money is just working better for you. Right.
Right.
And so that's how I started basically, and that's how the whole thing got going.
Yeah, and this I want to make sure I kind of bring this to you, or kind of bring this up to get your thoughts on this, because one of my favorite books ever is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert
Mhm.
Kiyosaki. And once I read that, my whole philosophy, my money mindset, everything changed for me because of, just him bringing up the concept of assets and liabilities, right? And
Right.
as I dive deeper into his work, I think he actually mentioned it in the book as well. He does real estate because there's ways of changing your money mindset. So when you mention turnkey operations in terms like that, can you kind of elaborate a little bit for our listeners so they know it's not something, because before that book, I would be very intimidated when you say real estate. It sounds like a bunch of stuff I don't want to know, I don't want to do, I don't have the money for this, and people just kind of shrug it off. But when you change your money mindset, a lot of things start to become open for you. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing, and I will weave the turnkey aspect into this, is most people, and it's even in a sense true if you're a business owner, but the vast majority of people are basically employees in some sense. What you're really doing is exchanging your time for money. Right. And when you say this business and money mindset is basically finding ways how you can make your money work for you. And if you want to top that, if you want to take that one level further, then it would be one, let your money work for you. And number two, let other people's money work for you.
Yes, sir.
Right. So now if we take this into the turnkey aspect, if you look at real estate, and you go like on shows or channels like HGTV and so forth and so forth. I mean, they put it in a pretty nice light, but fundamentally, whether you do wholesaling or you become a real estate agent or you do flipping or renovations or any of that kind of stuff, means you have to take some of your 24 hours a day or some of your 168 hours a week that we all have, same amount, and dedicate it to these activities. And I basically, at the time, trying to build my own consulting company, I really thought about, okay, well, if I want to build my consulting business, how am I supposed to take more time, other time for basically that stuff? And it really didn't work. So turnkey providers, this is really the important thing. And there are different kinds, but the kind that I'm working with and our clients get introduced to is the kind of a company that says, okay, we occupy a certain region. My most favorite one right now is in Ohio. So they decided they want to be in the region between Cincinnati, Dayton, and kind of like all the little villages around it.
Wow.
In that area, there are probably, I don't know, like 1 million people living or something like that. And so they say, okay, we go around and we look, where are the ugly duckling houses in good neighborhoods? And those are the houses that, for example, like the kids inherited from their grandma, but it's 1,000 miles away and the house just sitting there. Is it used? Is it occupied or not? No, but it's sitting there, and the longer it sits there, it starts deteriorating. It's just a normal thing.
Right.
So they go find out who owns it. They contact the person and say, hey, we know you have this house on 123 Main Street in Dayton. We would like to make you an offer to buy it. So let's say they buy it, and the people who sell it, they say, oh, we're glad that we can get rid of it. We didn't ever really want to have it. So now they have this, but they know it needs a lot of work. The good turnkey companies have what's called a construction and renovation department. They send that team in, and they basically take the whole thing apart and put it back together. New code, new electric, new plumbing, new bathroom, new all the stuff. So now they have basically a fully renovated property, and they come to people like me and say, hey, you have a community of investors. We have a property for you that we would like to offer you. So now obviously the price is how much did they pay to buy it, how much put in to renovate it, plus a profit. And they cannot put the price, in our case, higher than any other similar properties in the area. Why? Because we want other people's money work for us. So we go to a bank and say, hey, bank, we got this property on 123 Main Street in Dayton.
Right.
And the seller, the turnkey provider, wants to sell it to us for $145,000. The bank says, okay, we send an appraiser, let them appraise it, which means they kind of compare to similar houses in about a 1 mile radius. And if the appraiser comes back and said, okay, I think this thing is worth $148,000, then we would get the financing. Right. So it can, if they say we want to sell it for 170, the appraiser would say 148, and they would never give us more than what the appraiser says. Right. So here we have the renovation department and the marketing and sales department, and the important third component is the property management department. Right. So now, all under one umbrella, if you and I were to say we buy this house on 123 Main Street together, we basically get the money from the bank. I would also, if you were my client, help you get insurance and all that other stuff. The turnkey provider renovated it. They know it inside out. They offered it to us. We bought it from them. They manage it for us, which means after that process, all we have to do once a month, half an hour, talk to them and say, hey, how is my house on 123 Main Street doing?
Right. So,
right. And let me just finish real quick. We select that property because we analyzed, does it make us money? And if the answer is yes, that would be the criteria to buy it.
Right. So there, well, first of all, the first question I would have is what would what are the chances that you get a house that's run down in a decent looking neighborhood? Like how does that is there a specific person searching for that or how does that come about? Because that I never even I seen rundown houses, but these neighborhoods aren't the best. And what are some of the elements that you look at to say that this is a house that's qualified in a positive neighborhood?
Ryan. So one circumstance why houses get neglected, and I don't mean run down in the sense of almost falling apart. I mean, like when you drive by and you see, okay, like, the gutters are not really quite straight anymore. The shingles on the roof may not look perfect. You might see the windows are kind of old. The landscaping hasn't been really taken care much or stuff like that, right? So it's not like, just about falling apart, but it really needs some
Right.
significant TLC. Why do you find these? Couple of reasons. One is the thing that I mentioned already with the inheritance. The other thing that happens is I would say, since about 2008-10, when we had the big financial crisis, people took advantage of the fact that a lot of people that had money took advantage of the fact that there were lots of properties in foreclosure and stuff like that that they could buy relatively cheaply.
Mhm.
And the only people that I know that had the opportunity to do that were basically my baby boomer generation, right? So if they were like in their 50s and 60s and they thought, hey, this is a good retirement investment,
Mhm.
fast forward to now, they're now in their mid 70s, early 80s.
Right.
So, and in most cases, they don't do our approach where they use a turnkey provider. They try to manage it all by themselves.
Right.
And the older you get, the harder it gets to manage this stuff. If you have more than one, the harder it gets. So that's another reason why they might be neglected. And then the third reason that I found is that people themselves, and I hate to say this, but it's a fact, and it's a fact pretty much in every neighborhood, even in Santa Barbara, California, in good neighborhoods, you
Mhm.
find people who, for whatever circumstances or whatever might have happened to them, they just stop really taking care of their property, even if they're the owner.
Mhm.
Right? And so those are kind of the three main reasons that I found why properties are neglected. And
Right.
what a turnkey provider, or even if you and I were to do this ourselves, we would obviously look, how are the bones, how is the structure of the property. If it's too far gone, then no, you wouldn't go for it. But you want to find the happy medium where you can make kind of like a cheap low ball offer and
Right.
have a chance to get it, and then spend like 40, $50,000 to renovate it and still get a profit out of market. And keep in mind, like the turnkey provider I mentioned as an example, they, over the years, because they keep adding properties and then manage them for the investors, they have now a portfolio of more than 800 properties in that area.
Hmm.
And when you do something 800 times, no matter what it is, you get really good at it. They have people driving around these neighborhoods and they know exactly where the properties are that might be worth going after.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it was I this is live. I didn't even realize that there were actual turnkey providers that will take so much of the legwork out of real estate investment. And that helps because, like I mentioned in the intro, one of the reasons you actually get into business or got into doing this is to help families, is to help people that maybe not
Right.
in situations that actually want to be in affluent neighborhoods. So, kind of go and speak a little bit about that and maybe some examples about how you've been able to help certain families get in better situations in their housing and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, the part is a lot of, and I think the media is kind of, I don't really know why they're doing it, but sorry about the noise in the background. The media is basically making the public think in certain ways about real estate. Like, anybody who is talking about landlords, it's always like calls in the middle of the night and cleaning
Right.
toilets and fixing faucets, which if you work with a turnkey provider is not really true.
Hmm.
But they also kind of try to draw this picture of the investor who is competing with people who want to buy a house for their own residence.
Right.
I like to also address, and for your audience and for you as one, the aspect of, as the investor owner of the property, even though we get it managed by the turnkey provider, we are also doing a social service in a sense, right? What I'm looking for is, and I'm telling my turnkey providers, I want you to find a good family that we can rent this house to for a fair price.
Wow.
Now, obviously, a fair price includes that I have some positive cash flow at the end of the month. But instead of going to the absolute top of the market rate that I could potentially charge, I rather want to have a family in the house that, respects the house, likes to live in the house, thinks the rent is fair, treat the house well, and then pay on time every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Right, so
important.
we are basically getting people out of apartment complexes when they start wanting to build a family, but they don't have, for whatever reason, the ability to put the savings together or qualify for a mortgage. And right now, if you look at the statistics, I mean, anybody listening to us can go and go on Google and look at like affordability statistics for renting and buying. Buying is almost impossible, partially because the affordability prices of houses have gone up a lot. But because interest rates have gone up so much, when people say, okay, I make, I don't know, $3,000 a month, but I would have to pay $1,700 a month for my mortgage, you just don't qualify.
Right.
But I can maybe rent it to them for 1,500 and they can live in the same house that they couldn't afford to buy.
Right. And they would have to have, and I want to make that clear for the listeners as well. You would have to have the mindset of wanting to respect the house and wanting to grow. I've heard, I mean, there've been situations where there's certain apartments that don't allow you to make a certain amount of money. Like there's certain places in certain areas where if you make too much, they don't even let you in the apartment. So they keep certain people in certain areas. And I thought that was kind of heartbreaking. And when it comes to what you do, you, like you said, you actually provide sort of some social work there, or some helping out when it comes to family. So that aspect is very important to notify as well.
Right. And I mean, in a sense, I have seen, just literally, I just have an actual example right now in I have a cluster of properties west of Chicago, and we have one tenant who gave notice that she is going to move out. And I asked, can you tell me why she's moving out? Doesn't she like the house anymore? Does she think the rent is too high? And they asked her, and she said, no, I actually finally got to the point where I can buy my own house.
Ah, there you go. All right.
Right, like, so she rented the house for a little more than 3 years,
Yeah.
and obviously was able to put a little bit of money aside, and she finally is able to get her own house. So I like those kind of stories where they say, okay, I was apartment, I start a family, I live in a rental house,
Right.
and then ultimately get my own.
Well, and that's excellent too. And the question I actually have for you, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this as well, is there a way, or have you even considered maybe going from residential to commercial to serve business owners to make it so they're able to get into a certain place? Or how does that, how do you sort of navigate that at all? Or if you
Well, I obviously have contemplated the question.
mm-hmm.
The issue that I see is, for me and for our clients, and what I found is most people have at least tried, when they become clients of ours, to try and want to invest in real estate. They often either already are or have tried to own their own residence. And what's interesting is there's basically three categories of real estate investing. And I don't know to what extent people are aware of that. The one category is basically commercial real estate investing for things like, a factory building, or like a mall, or a gas station, or a storage facility, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's one part of commercial. The second component is called commercial residential. And that is anything from an apartment complex to like an office building and those kind of things, but mainly where people live, like an apartment complex. And then the third group is pure residential.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I owning a house or residence, and you and I investing in like that house that we have been discussing, 123 Main Street, is the exact same rules, whether we buy it directly to live in it ourselves, or we buy it to rent it out. Now, there are some tax advantages if you rent it out, but the process and the set of rules and stuff is all the same. You qualify by comparing the value of similar houses in the area. You get an appraisal from the bank just as if you were to buy the house. You need to get insurance on it just as if it were your own residence. Now, if you compare that to commercial residential, and the line in the sand that the government has drawn starts when a facility where people live has more than 5 doors, 5 apartments, 5 condos, whatever you want to call it, 5 entry doors, or, like 1, 2, 3 Main Street, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth, right? So more than 5. And what then happens is, in comparison to you and I having a normal residential house like what I help people to buy and invest in, as soon as it becomes a little apartment complex, and it doesn't matter, it's 5, 10, 100, 200, the set of rules completely changes. The value, I don't want to go too deep, but the value of that property is exclusively calculated on how much rent does it produce. So if you say you have a 10-unit apartment complex, every unit makes $1,000, so $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year, and then there's a multiplier. So they might say the multiplier is 6. So that apartment complex is worth $720,000. And the only way you can actually increase the value of that thing is by making the rent higher. See, if I go to my properties, if somebody says, okay, this neighborhood gets lots and lots of renovations, right? Like my turnkey provider found one property and another one and another one and another one, and more are all getting renovated. So the ugly ducklings all become nice looking white swans. Well, then the whole neighborhood is getting more and more valuable. And because each house is compared to the other houses, everybody gets a higher value, regardless whether the market in general is increasing, which it did as well. Right. So it's a really different set of rules, is in a nutshell the reason. And so I contemplated it. The other thing, just honestly, as one, if you want to do it for real, and you say, okay, I start with a 20, 30, 40 unit apartment complex, you very quickly into the millions. Right. If a 10 unit, like I just did the little calculation, is already 720,000. As soon as you have 20, 30 units, you're in the millions. And the point is, you have to find a bank who says, okay, you're new to this, but I'm willing to give you $1 million for finance. Yeah, and that's not very likely to happen either, right? So I believe it is just harder, and it's a little bit in this overall. You started out speaking about mindset, and I'm totally with you. The point is, what can I wrap my mind around, and what can I realistically accomplish with my means? And I started with very limited means. So any kind of multi-million dollar thing was not even possible for me. Right. And now I have admittedly built a portfolio that is worth a couple of $1 million, but it was step by step over many years, instead of going right ahead and say, okay, I want to buy this 20-unit apartment complex.
So what would you say is like the next phase to your business? If anyone's listening in now and wants to reach out to you, maybe it's a family that's, trying to get into a home, or it's an investor, turnkey, how would you say is next for your business?
Well, the thing is, I developed this mentoring program, and basically for people that are listening to us and say, okay, I would be interested in, learning how and what you do and how you do it, and how we can actually, with very little time spent, start building a residential real estate investing portfolio. The one option is, if you say, I'm not very familiar with all of this, I kind of hear this somewhat the first time, I would strongly recommend to do the mentoring program, so I can literally teach you twice a month for like a year or so. And in the process, we would literally try to buy 1, maybe 2 houses if you have the money available to that, but at least 1. So we have gone through the whole process of finding it, analyzing it, getting it from the turnkey provider, buy it, get it into management, all the stuff. So you have gone through the whole process once with me holding your hand.
Now,
if somebody is,
I don't mean to the process of getting one house, how long does that actually take?
I typically try to get the closing within the first 6 to 7 months.
6 to 7 months. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not that it takes that long, but if you really want to learn the process, I mean, I could get you one tomorrow. And this is actually the other part. If somebody says, okay, I'm listening to Aswan and Axel and I like the approach, I just hadn't ever considered it, but I generally understand how investing in real estate investing works, then the other option is to say, I want to join you, Axel's community as an investor. I kind of know my stuff already. I just don't have access to all these the turnkey providers and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the other option. And this comes out, I always offer about an hour-long complimentary conversation just to get to know each other and find out, are you somebody who already has some experience? You pretty fit with what goes on with money. You just want to have access to my resources.
Right.
Or do you rather want to learn so that after the 1-year mentoring program, you can go out and do it on your own, even though I'm always going to be there to help you? So which group are you in? And so that's why I say, if somebody likes what we're discussing, I would say, reach out, go to idealwealthgrower.com. In the top right corner, there's a little button to book a call, and we just get to know each other and see if it's a fit.
It's ideal. So just to make sure we're clear, it's idealgrowth.com.
Ideal Wealth Grower.
idealwealthgrowth.com, and that'll be included in the show notes as well. Is there any other way that you would like to put out there in terms of how to get in touch?
No, I want to keep it simple. I don't want to say, I have this phone number and this email and this podcast and blah. No, idealwealthgrower.com. I told my web guy, put that button prominently in the top right-hand corner. Anybody can find it. You get directly on my calendar and you book a call. And it's really, like all the people that have ever joined us, I'm really proud about that. And I'm glad you give me the chance to say this. Yeah. All the people who have ever joined us, nobody has ever really left. Yes, they have completed the mentoring program, but we're still working together. Anytime they go for their next investment property, they reach out, we look at it together, and I keep constantly, growing my resources. I have new lenders, I have new property managers and stuff, so that I can offer more and more different services in different locations for people.
Yes, and it's also, again, like I was telling you guys before, it's very important that you understand passive income is so very important. You don't, just like you said, there's all these different ways of communicating with people. You never know which way the wind is going to blow. There's not a single person out there that can actually accurately predict the future. So the passive income needs to become an emergency, and whatever it is, you can never have enough money. So do what you have to do to figure out it, and do it in a moral way. I don't mean to say that as do whatever. I mean, do it morally. Create passive income for yourself, because your future is so very important. And this is just a great way, an awesome way of creating opportunities for yourself and really not having to do a ton of work. Obviously, you have to be very detail oriented and organized when it comes to what you do, but you're not going to have to spend hours upon hours doing this. So take advantage of these things. And I do want to be very respectful of your time. So the way I close out all the shows, Axel, is I want you to use your imagination for a little bit. I want you to pretend that the Zoom room, there's 100 different new families and 100 different new potential lenders, 100 mentees. There's a bunch of your ideal people. Just kind of talk to them a little bit about what you offer, and we'll officially close, about how you can help them, and we'll officially close with that.
Right. Yeah. So what I would say, if there were this 100 strong audience, I would say I would love the opportunity for you and me to connect, so I can see how ready you are to become your own boss, to create the mindset of the creator of your own future, and get access to all the resources that I have created for our existing community, for what we call the tribe. And I want to invite everybody, like you said, Aswan, to go to the website and book a call so that we can start working together. And it might be that the ideal thing for you is the mentoring program, or you might already have some experience and you want to just have access to the investments, or we might together find out, while there are a few more steps that you need to take to get ready. And I would love to tell you what those are, because ultimately what we really want to get to, and I try to be the role model here. I've gone through that process. I now have 9 properties and the 10th one in construction. And I've gotten to the point where each of the properties generates cash flow plus my military pension, so I can decide, do I want to work or not? And
Wow.
that's what I would really like to get for everybody else. And if you're interested in that, if you want to get to a point where you have the choice to say, do I want to sell my time to anybody or not, then I think it's time for us to talk.
Oh man, that's excellent. That is excellent. All right. Like I said, appreciate you coming on, man. This has been incredible, an incredible lesson on how to manage and how to make sure you're just setting yourself up for the future. And I do want to make sure this point is clear. You're never too young to start thinking about this stuff. You're never too young to start, putting these kind of watering these seeds and put them in the back of your head and figure out how you can maneuver as opposed to just going the normal school route and thinking that that's going to take care of all your problems. Never too young to just expand your mind in some way, shape, form, or fashion. All right. With all
Now,
that,
can I say one thing?
Oh, please,
One
please.
quick thing. I can tell you one thing for sure to this point about never too young.
Mhm.
And I've been around on this globe for quite some time, as you can probably see. I had never more available money to put aside or put into investments than when I had no family and I was basically on my own. Right. And the other part is the sooner you start, the earlier you can retire and enjoy life.
Oh man, yes, that is important. That is very, very important as well. So thank you for throwing that out there as well. All right, with all that, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.